Hello, and welcome to the So Emotional podcast. Here on the cast, we discuss everything emotions through the lens of attachment, the nervous system, and internal parts work. We're a little irreverent and like to have fun exploring the emotional issues and dynamics that interest us. So come along and hang out. Let's explore the fascinating lands of emotions.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the So Emotional podcast. I'm Angela Wetzel, and this
is Nick Carl. Thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
And we are here just chatting about anything that we want to chat about.
That's right.
And basically, this is for everyone, I guess, fellow travelers on our emotional journey in a way that just feels fun and honest and irreverent. And yeah, I don't know how else to explain that.
Yeah, it's an exploration.
Yeah, exploration. Yeah. There you go.
And I've got a bullet point for you, something obviously we discussed. Expectations and entitlement in relationships.
Right.
Right. We're going to talk about it.
So this podcast episode was inspired by a lot of things, but mostly with an interesting theme happening in my life lately that actually has been happening my whole life. And in order to not be like super discreet about it, has to do with non-reciprocal relationships, or like crushes or fantasy relationships, and me being mostly on the receiving end of that, although I've definitely been on the other side of that too. So it's kind of just talking about like men and women and relationships and like that weird, super awkward, cringe-worthy sometimes, like, you know, what do you say, what do you do when someone is like, I really like you and I love you, and you're like, I don't feel the same way. Right? It's so, yeah. So,
so bad.
I'm like, I think on both sides, it's really, because it's like,
absolutely.
You know, part of it is like, I feel like I'm rejecting someone or I'm hurting someone. And on the other side, it's like, oh, I'm being rejected, and it's so shameful and humiliating and sucks when it's like, does it really have to be? Probably not, but you know, I just I just feel like perhaps at the core of it is like some kind of codependent enmeshment type patterns, or you know, we feel overly responsible, or we don't view people as like empowered, and so that's what we're gonna unpack.
The ooey gooey nature too of being sort of the one who's projecting out, you know, is a very, I think, weak place to come from. You know, it's like, oh, I've been fantasizing about you, and you know, like coming to somebody in that with like a lot of preconceived things is like, it's not. I don't think it's like a strong place to come from either.
Right.
So anyway, so what do you got? You gotta how do we story this out? I've got some stories. I'll tell you what.
What was the first bullet point we were going to talk about?
Well, it says
reciprocity.
The entitlement to feel good and live is the one I have on here.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like right. So one of the drives of this, right? The drive of having a totem in your mind, which is probably one of like the sort of like, I don't know, the white motivations, the good motivations underneath of it all, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, and by totem, I think what Nick is saying is like what I would describe as like having that fantasy relationship where perhaps someone puts you in a tower or up on a pedestal, and then has like builds a relationship with you that is not very two-sided. It's like your relationship with this person, like you may have had an actual relationship, years ago, or maybe there was never a relationship, or maybe it was a friendship or whatever. But in any case, like somehow this relationship where it ended off in person, they picked up in their mind and then held on to certain aspects of that relationship and then have been replaying those moments and maybe building on them and perhaps like building future moments and possibility. And then there can be like a whole like, oh, I dream of us doing this together or being together. And I actually think this can actually happen in relationships too,
Absolutely.
where like we future trip or like, oh, I'm really, I could see this going places, or I can see our children, I can see our home, I can see this is going to be so great. And then it's like, there's something about that is kind of keeping us out of like the reality of the present moment. And then that's where things get really weird, funky in some ways, because attachment does happen like in our brain. Like what we tell our brain is happening, our brain is like, this is happening.
Mm.
And so when we are fantasizing, we actually are building chemical, hormonal attachments at the same time, even without the presence of another person. So it's actually strengthening these like attachment loops and positioning this person as like an attachment figure, which then becomes more difficult. Like in the face of a breakup, then it's like really missing that person and then continuing to like think about them and like visit their Facebook page or their Instagram page, even when you know you shouldn't, is like kind
Oh
of
god.
keeping those attractions alive. Right. Yeah, I've totally done that. I've done that too. Oh, and like the
uh,
feelings that come up,
I
or
maybe did it today. Oh
right,
god.
or or when you like see that they have a new partner
Oh
and
god.
it like is dashing some of the fantasies that you have, or bringing up like your attachment wounds of betrayal or abandonment or whatever else. So it's just
Yeah.
such a, and we've been talking about this like Gordian knot of just like shit and layers of shit,
Layers on layers.
layers on layers. And so yeah, like the reason why we were talking about like drive and instinct and entitlement, and I'm trying to like think of a good way to relate it to this whole thing, because it's almost like how we get into relationships. I feel like it almost must come from a place of entitlement and like drives, because there's like
Yeah.
sexual drives and our drives to like connect and attach, which are so very human and instinctive and instinctual. And
Right.
if we don't have that like basic level of worthiness, um to even like reach out and connect to people, like if we didn't have that instinctively like inherently built into us as children, as babies, like we would have died, because we wouldn't even cry out, we wouldn't reach out for connection. So I feel like those drives are, I think, and that entitlement even to be like, yeah, I'm expecting this, like I'm expecting when I cry that someone responds.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, without that expectation or even the entitlement that I deserve that, then why would I expend any energy, right?
Yeah, there absolutely feels. We were talking about attractors and repellers. Okay. So just in my life,
Yeah.
this situation feels very much as an attractor, like it's pulling me in, like that I need to feed. Right. I need energy, as in like getting my attachment needs met. Right. And it's just like pulling me in, uh,
Mhm.
pulling me in really strongly. Um, when you talked earlier about so I wanted to say about the totem, about like my own totem that have been playing around with in my head over the past, say, couple of years. Um, that I was in a relationship that ended, and it ended because of like feeling I was being trapped, that I was trapped by something, right? And so I ended a relationship and moved away. But
Mhm.
always there was a relationship with this totem, with the thing that's like hanging
Well,
around
like
me.
let's give her a name. Let's give her a new name. Like
A new name.
yeah, like what's I don't know, what's like kind of a fun fantasy name.
Sally?
Is that sexy for you?
No. Sally was my old dog's name. How about I don't know, Galadriel? Well, whatever. Let's just call her mm,
Did you say Gladria?
Galadriel. Yes.
I've never heard that name.
We'll call her Galadriel. This is fine.
Okay, Gladria. I've never heard of that.
Galadriel.
Okay, so that's a great fantasy name because it
Okay.
sort of sounds like from She-Ra or He-Man or something.
Right. So Galadriel. Yeah. So what's my motivation for even starting anything with Galadriel? Right. It's to like, hey, I have I have needs, and
Hmm.
they're not outlined or sort of like spoken or like clearly defined. It's just like, oh, I feel compelled to go towards you, and you're going to give me these needs, you know. But
Yeah.
at some point, and for me, this is like my expression, like that becomes untrustworthy. Which is just
Mm.
part of my attachment blueprint, or sort of like the things that I my own personal injuries, right?
Do you mean what you feel attracted to, like pulled to, like you can't trust those instincts, or that she becomes an untrustworthy thing when there's more risk?
Yeah, she becomes an untrustworthy thing when there becomes more risk.
Like when you're actually beginning to attach, then it's like, oh, I
Yeah,
don't trust the
right.
connection because she's not
Yeah,
trustworthy.
this is not a good situation for me.
Okay, I got
So
it.
I get out of the situation, get myself out of the situation, but it never like left my sphere of influence. It was always just like hanging around there, right?
Mhm.
And so I think about then that I'm fully in like a disconnected place of of fantasy. It's pure fantasy. And so was it fantasy before? It's a little bit fuzzy, but like out of the relationship now, I'm totally in a fantasy place. And I think like 8 or 10 months went by until I started to like contemplate the end of the fantasy. It's like she doesn't care about me anymore. She's not in my life, and I went into a fucking total panic, like way freak out, right? And
Wow.
and then it was like around that same time. It was like a couple days later where I go and check her Facebook, and she got married, and it was just like I started having like I had a real
Wait. When did you check the Facebook? Was
so
this
like
recently?
no, this is a few years ago.
Okay, so like, okay, so
Also
for some
today.
reason,
Also today. Yes. Full
okay,
disclosure.
this is
Also
the
today.
one. Also,
Yes.
this is
Yeah.
like a follow up to see if like the marriage is good. You know
I,
what the
like I tried to hang with it today. Like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? What is this? And it's so it it comes with such little information. Like, there's just a drive. There's just a pull. It's just like, like feeling out. Like, like where are you? I need you. I don't know what I need, but I need something, right?
right.
But
Can I ask you a question?
yeah, no, no.
Okay. My question is, what do you think that fantasy was protecting you from? Okay, so there was like the breakup. Like the breakup needed to happen. I think from what it sounds like, it was just like the level of like risk and challenge was like too much.
Too much.
There was just like too much dysregulation. It just wasn't
Yeah,
safe.
absolutely.
And so it was like, this has to end. And so it seemed like perhaps there was a part of you that was like, well, this shit's ending. And maybe another part that's like, well, he's not ready for that. Maybe, or I'm just curious, like what is your perspective or take on that? Like what the fantasy was actually protecting you from confronting, or like how did it protect you or help you?
I I don't think that I don't think that it did help me, right? It helped me to feel terrible. It helped me to feel isolated. It helped me to feel like that I couldn't connect with people, that I couldn't get my needs met, that like trying to get my needs met was like a fool's errand. That's what it felt like. It felt like that the that there was a piece of me that got left there when I left. Like the piece of me that needed things was still there, and still being tortured by being there.
Uh,
So I don't.
so maybe I'm trying to, cause like I feel like these things, even though they're not always like super clear, that there's like a reason why those strategies like exist, or like there's that saying like the the medicine like becomes the poison. So maybe it was medicine at one point, given like an early relational like childhood context,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe now in adult life it's like so painful, it's like poisonous.
Mm.
And so it's like adding or viewing like what was poisonous back then is actually now the medicine, because now you're an adult and you can like go back and like do things and take back your power. But I almost wonder, like maybe because that was such a high risk, like high challenge thing that was super dysregulating, like maybe it was a way to keep you from connecting with other people temporarily, while like so you were still um like this is too risky, too much challenge, like maybe it kept you from getting into something new. I don't know,
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious around that.
No, I don't know. I feel like there is. I still feel like there's some kind of disconnect. Like how does the totem? How does this thing like separate away from just being integrated into the person? Right. That's the thing that like because it feels. I don't know. The more that I work on staying present with my own emotional needs and not letting the fantasy sort of take over, uh, it just leads to this question of like, okay, well, if the fantasy, you know, if the fantasy is not going to run the show, then like, what do we get to sort of experience? That I still that I can like embody. I can embody like more consciously a real expectation to like move forward in the world and be like, no, I can get whatever I need. Like that's okay. So I don't know. I think that maybe it's that some kind of not trusting that you can get your needs met, that it has to become like some kind of dream. I don't know.
So actually I just thought of something that I wrote, and if I can find my note really fast. La la, it's not that note. Wait, if I can find it. Okay, this is what I wrote. Let me know if it makes sense, but it relates to this.
Okay.
The function of internalized trauma is to take control of a flawed perception of our own being and turn it into something we can do in hopes of changing it. So it's kind of like repetition compulsion. So it's like that internalized, like, instead of viewing our caretakers as like bad or wrong or incapable or all those other things that we could have, it's like internalizing that like shame, internalizing all of those things so that it gives us something to do, because there's like because otherwise we would attribute it to well, it's like thinking there's something wrong with our being, so then we decide to do things instead to overcome that. So it's almost like, did it give you things to like strive for, to work on, to continue to try to master? Did it prolong that relationship in a way in your brain, because it was like similar to what was going on maybe when you were a child?
Can you tell that in a story, a personal story? Can you illustrate
Like
that idea?
in my own story?
Sure.
Yeah, actually maybe I can. Okay. So I don't know how to like summarize this super quickly, but I will say watching my own relationships and the types of people. So like I got married when I was had just turned 20, and that person that I married, like that lasted for 9 years. Like that I would say was this like completely unconscious idea of what I thought like marriage and relationship should look like. Almost like it almost felt like I always called this persona or that person who I was. It's not super nice. It's a little self-deprecating, but I used to call her like Betty Crock of shit. Is that a Betty Crocker? Because I had a cake stand and I'm like, why the fuck do I have a cake stand? Like I
Yeah,
don't
you seem like a cake stand kind of lady.
like maybe I'm not like a cake stand person, and I'm like, but I don't even like cake that much. Like I like brownies, like I would put brownies in there, but
Crock
it
of
was
shit.
just like this whole idea of almost this like 1950s 60s like housewife. So it was like somebody else's dream I was living, like some kind of American dream,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
anyway, the thing they say about the American dream is like it only works if you're asleep or something like that.
Right.
And I was totally asleep. And but also to like people on the outside looking in, like I had everything, like a really good relationship, and I was making lots of money, and he made lots of money, and we lived in a really like nice $500,000 home. And so there were people were like jealous of that, but looking back, it was like that relationship was, I think for me, like pretty, oh gosh, I don't even know how to explain it. If it was totally counter dependent, it was just completely unconscious. And I think it was like all of my stuff mixed in there. Like all of my, of course, I think all of our relationships are the like mixture of what's healed and what's not healed. And there was a lot of unhealed stuff there. And then but I wasn't like ever super attracted to him. That was part of the thing. Like I loved him, but it wasn't, I like made sure that it never felt super crazy, like not super attracted, super passionate. It was like, it worked. It was practical, like
Functional.
business functional. Yeah. It
Yeah.
almost seemed like a good business deal.
Hmm.
In a lot of ways it had been, and then it became very, very bad, not good business deal at all. Like super fucked up, dysfunctional. And then the next relationship was like so the opposite. Like it was very playful and fun, and like the roles had reversed. So one was more like, I think I was feeling more like I needed help or needed to learn things about the world, because I really didn't have a lot of foundational like wherewithal, I guess, about life or whatever. And this other relationship, I was like teaching and kind of enabling in some ways. And again, there was like not this attractive piece. Like I felt like it was disorganized, but I felt like more in control, I think, than my other relationship. And then of course there was always a point where I felt like I lost control, where I like loved them too much or I cared too much, and then I lost the upper hand or whatever. And then so I made a promise to myself. I had like dated a lot in New York, but there was this one guy I was like kind of seeing a little bit, and I was like realizing that I dated men that I wasn't attracted to. And it was a protective strategy of mine. It was like mostly unconscious, but I decided to date men that I was like really attracted to. And that changed a lot. It like changed my level of challenge and risk in relationships that I think I wasn't able to approach like back then. Like it
Right.
would have been just too hot and too terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So now I was like doing this, and it was very interesting to see the things that showed up. But essentially what it really started activating was like my deep-seated abandonment wound, like how deeply abandoned I had felt, and this like deep need to be chosen. And even though I ended this relationship, what I had wanted for him was to say like, oh, I've totally like thought about this, and now I know what I want, and like I'm sure like I want you. Yes. Like I want him to come back and be like, yes, I know it's you. And I'm sure and whatever. Um I said I was going to relate it, and I'm trying to figure out how to relate it back to, okay, right. So there's a piece about like abandonment, like feeling abandoned or like unworthy. So if I'm unworthy, and a lot of my unworthiness came like around my emotions, like if I was emotional or it was too much, right? So if I was able to control my emotions and like figure out how to control that, then I could be like accepted and I would be like acceptable and loved or whatever. And I guess I had gotten to a point where I was like rocking that boat, which was new, where I was like willing to be very vulnerable and very emotional in relationship. But then that self-fulfilling prophecy came around because I actually was, I mean, I was self-abandoning and self-rejecting, but I chose someone that would would reject those emotions and be like, this is too
Too
much.
much, right?
Right
Ooh,
now I'm trying.
very
Oh yeah.
very Gordian naughty of you, by the way.
Yes, very naughty. I'm so naughty. Yeah. So then I'm trying to like tie it back to this like fantasy part of it. So the fantasy was like it was like keeping this like hope alive that well there was a so like trying to observe my instincts or what was going on. Like I had really wanted to like reach out and be like helping. Like there was a part of me that was like, oh, he just needs to understand like how important this is, or whatever. And I like sat on my hands. I was like, no, you are not. Like you said what you said. He was talking about not feeling a lot of like that he didn't want to commit fully anymore. He didn't know if he wanted commitment or monogamy. Like he said the things, like you heard him say the things. You're not going to be the person that just waits while he figures things out.
Mm-hmm.
And while it was excruciating to break up with him because I was in love with him, like I was like, I like adored him, seriously. But it just my brain, like all the things I knew, like everything just kicked in. And I was like, I can't do this to myself. Like I have to choose myself. And then so I did that. Like I followed through and I sat on my hands and I had really hoped for a different outcome. And there was like the fantasy, I think, kind of kept the situation like open in my mind, almost hoping for what like Freud would call like mastery, like mastering that relationship, in hopes that I had changed enough so that I could have like the ending that I wanted, which was not very much about him. It was more about my dad actually choosing me and wanting to like have a relationship with me. So it wasn't really about a romantic relationship. It was a lot more of like a parentified relationship. Was I able to
Yeah, no.
like, did I bring it all the way around? Because it's like kind of trying to explain a lot in a
Well,
little.
it's all there. I can't hold it consciously, all the pieces as it floats around, when you talk about that sort of realization of like what the fantasy is opening for and what it's doing for you, how does it begin to tell you that it's about that primary relationship with your father? Like, is that something that's floating around in your being or your knowing as
Right. How I knew was because the confusion around why he didn't change courses and why he wasn't stepping into claiming all these things, like it felt so familiar. It was
Oh,
so very exactly the same
okay.
kind of deep,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
existential pain
Right.
that I was like, this is the same feeling I have
Yeah.
around my relationship with my dad.
Huh.
And well, there were lots of other like similarity things too that exist around it. But what was interesting, the relationship was very healing in a lot of ways where, again, this stuff is always a little bit weird when you like, as a person who was having the awareness that there were parental elements in it, it gets, but actually a pretty big fan of like Freud and Lacan um and I feel like a lot of his stuff works. I don't think all of his theories work, but the stuff with like the parental things and like repetition compulsion and like
Yeah.
mastering relationships, like I feel like that stuff is very foundational and makes a lot of sense. And yeah, but basically I had the awareness in the relationship that what I was struggling with was very much my dad's stuff.
Huh.
And there were some funny things happening, like when I started to date men that I was attracted to, because like they kind of like it's spoken about attraction in like terms of polarity. So as for example, like a cisgender heterosexual woman, and it doesn't really matter like what gender you ascribe to. Um, Basically we will generally be attracted to our polar, like our opposite. So for children, like how we model attractions is with our opposite gendered parent or opposite energy parent. So like as in someone who's like feminine energy in both gender and how I prefer to show up energetically, because we both have masculine and feminine energy, I could show up like there are women that are feminine looking but have predominantly masculine energy, and that's how they want to show up in relationship. And there are men that are in masculine bodies but have a lot of feminine energy, and
Right.
those are their like authentic selves. And so those people like can meet up and be in a relationship, in a healthy thriving relationship. But then of course there's also what happens with a lot of people where you can be in like a feminine body and have dominant masculine energy, but that arose out of a survival need. And so it's actually inauthentic. So we still attract our polar opposite. So that woman may attract a man like in a masculine, masculine bodied man, if that's who she's attracted to physically wise. And then his dominating energy might be wounded feminine in the relationship. And so then there's lots of like interesting things that happen around like competing needs and like who's playing what roles. So that's like a whole other interesting thing I see a lot, which kind of it's hard to talk about. It's easier if I would like be able to draw diagrams around it. But basically what I'm saying is for straight women, like a lot of your attraction blueprint is going to come from your opposite gendered parent, because there's like polarity that exists. And for men, it'll be like their mothers. For
Right.
women, it'll be their fathers, right? And then for someone who's gay or lesbian, then it would be the same gendered parent. So for gay men, it would be their fathers. For lesbians, it would be their mothers.
Right.
Or and then depending on people that are like non-binary and whatever, it's
Right.
more about the energy. Um, but yeah, basically it was kind of weird to know that that was going on in the relationship, and that a lot of healing was going on where I was like, I feel like I'm spending time with my dad.
So were you dating the guys, let's say outside of your I don't know how you said it, less attractive guys, right? Were you
Mm-hmm.
doing that to sort of set you up in a, like, he's obviously going to choose me because of, well, we'll just
Um, I think okay, so I also have a theory that we will gravitate towards our safest um, connection first
Okay.
because the level of risk and challenge is like lower.
Right. For
So I
sure.
had a much easier, better relationship with my mother, and it was super enmeshed, codependent, and like I could say all the things, and I'm not going to right now.
Yeah.
But my marriage was very much felt, I think, a lot more like that enmeshed relationship, codependent enmeshed relationship. And then,
As
well,
opposed to,
actually, I'm
yeah.
trying to think. No, actually, that one may have been even one step out from that, like more counter dependent, because I think being too close to that dynamic would have been difficult as well because there was some level of challenge. So I think it was actually a bit more counter dependent where I was like trying to have some level of control or one, and unconsciously, of course, I wasn't doing this consciously, but it almost seemed like I was making a lot of decisions about that relationship like from my brain and not really from anything here down so much.
Right.
Um, yeah, and then the relationship after that had more elements of that stuff, I think, with my mother, which kind of makes sense to me, like why I didn't feel like a ton of attraction, but I grew to like love them. So I don't know. It's all really interesting and fascinating.
When I think about, trying to pull out some kind of nugget like that part about your dad, right? So whatever the last big relationship that I had, and I remember distinctly, but I didn't ever get any kind of like prints of like I'm feeling this way, which is very familiar to me. In a lot of ways, it was familiar to me
Mm-hmm.
because of it's just like sort of the desperate cycle of of trying to be in relationship with women as an adult, since I was like 16, has always been the, like this circle of like, you know, desperately leaning in and then like
Mm-hmm.
fucking running the other direction and just being in this like, you know, stuck like as like a ping pong ball going back and forth, and then like all the emotional just turmoil that creates, right? Uh, but also like I don't have like a great memory bank when it comes to like it's like pretty broad strokes from childhood, so it's
Mm-hmm.
there's just like there's like sort of a dark zone. It's like describing that like it's like I have no memories before the age of 15, which is like that's a sign of psychological trauma.
Wait, is
So
that true that you don't have a lot of memories before 15?
yeah, I felt like I just like woke up and like somebody turned on the computer. I was like pretty happy because the computer seemed like, oh yeah, fuck, I can think myself out of the paper bag. I'm essentially the smartest person on the planet. You're welcome. Like,
Hmm. Yeah,
uh,
that'd be a pretty good place to be.
I mean, like it felt that way for a hot minute, until it all came crashing down. But
Right.
as things like manifest and just like precipitate out, and I go out and live my life. There hasn't been a great like piecing the thing together. It's just like, oh, a giant feeling disembodied. Like I don't know where you come from, and I just feel terrible, and you just do it over and over until
Right.
like it almost kills you, and you're like, well, maybe is there anything else? And there is.
Mm. Yeah. For the sake of our bullets, did I?
Well, we were on entitlement, right? Entitlement, feel good, and we were talking about the projective thing, right? And so the projective totem, or like it's like some idea. There's something that's drawing us into connection or into sort of these realms where then we, with whatever we bring at the time, like we act out these,
Mhm.
right? Um, we started off with sort of talking about people who are doing that on their own and not in relationship with other people, which I don't know. I just think it's like a testament to how strong these drives and these desires are, right? That you can actually, with yourself, light up an idea, like a whole matrices of relationships and things and all these emotional pieces that can just be sort of like hoisted up into your mind and
Mhm.
lived with and you have a relationship with, right? I just think that it's like it emerges out of something, and they absolutely are connected. There is like a 3D real life thing that's making that happen or making it come up, which I think
Right.
is like that's what I want to like try to come more into relationship, even in my own life, right? Is to feel these stories, or the bigger stories, or like the stories like you're telling about how you're able to kind of put pieces together of these things that were foundational for you, that were giant energies, like they had a distinct imprint on your heart and on your being, and
Mhm.
then you worked backwards almost through time, to like to come back to the place where you came from, to like, oh, this is a thing, so
Yeah.
but the entitlement is that like that we all have these strong drives, like
Mhm.
I don't know, to get them met, that like that it's important that like we have needs and we have desires and we have like entitlement, which is sort of like the doorway open to dream and to fantasize, but then to probably go out and interact with people and try to like have relationships and be,
Right.
get our
I think
needs met.
that like dream and fantasy is like very much like our desires. It's
Mm.
like we all have desires and things that we well, and I think the desires come from some of like these basic drives. Like we need to attach and connect as much as we need to breathe,
Mm. Absolutely.
especially for, babies. Like they literally will die without connection, even if
Right.
all their other needs are met.
Right.
So that entitlement piece, like for connection, is super, super strong. And then what moves us forward is like this imagination and fantasy towards these desire, like these drives, desires, like actually being met. And what's interesting is like in like people that have those and just live there and never translate it into action, there's a reason why it's not being translated into action, because it doesn't feel fully safe. Like that feels too
Mm-hmm.
risky for whatever.
Absolutely.
It's
Right.
like too risky to burst that safe bubble of fantasy, because that feels like it might be someone's only um chance or their only experience with like intimacy or love or connection that isn't tainted by reality, which
Uh-huh.
might be a really painful reality. Like
Right.
their home environment or the only love that they saw
Yeah.
may have been like super chaotic or abusive or
Right.
like filled with rage and like all just all kinds of things, like really unstable, really
Yeah.
harmful. And maybe the only connection they've ever known has been people blowing past all of their boundaries, just
Yeah.
there being no safety and closeness. And yet what happens when we need safety and connection with someone else so much and we're not able to get that in reality, then we need to construct something to keep us alive, or like that
Yeah.
there's a hope for some chance of this being possible so that we can move forward towards it.
Right. Or or yeah, like what if you what do you have if you don't have your fantasy, right? All you have is pure pain, right? Like
Yeah,
you
if
don't
you
have it
have
in
a
order to.
shitty reality, yes, there's
Yeah.
like,
No, I mean
and
like the daydream, I daydream for, half my life,
mhm.
That's interesting. I don't know. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, well, then what do we risk by um by testing that fantasy like out in the real world? Then we risk maybe losing the only thing that we have, especially when like reality is so cruel and awful and shitty, whatever, over
Right.
here. Then it's like it puts like what we have kind of elevated or put on a pedestal or thought of as hope, like in dashing those hopes, then it's like, well, what do we have to actually live for or move towards?
Mm.
So we don't always want the confirming or disconfirming evidence of that like possibility, because it might be too painful if we were to be
Right.
disappointed by it, or if we were to fail.
Right. Well, it's like your dream is your last stronghold, you know? And so if your dream gets shattered, then what do you have left? But what I think that, at least happened for me is that, like, I got caught in the dream like a long time ago when I didn't have resources to be, like, as an adult, right?
Mhm.
And then it just, through habit and just sheer repetition, and nobody really told me otherwise, or showed me otherwise, that living out through my adult life still relying on the dream, right? Relying on the fantasy.
Right.
Um, so, like, we talked about the practice of, like, shattering your. Oh, goddamn.
Like bursting your fantasy bubble
Bursting your fantasy,
or shattering the illusion.
right? Through rejection, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That, yeah, I don't know. So, as adults, I don't know. Is it can it be helpful to shatter, like, bring people into reality, to shatter dreams? I mean, I don't know. I think
Well,
probably that's a protective mechanism that is still, like, being employed all the time for people who need it because they don't have anything else, right?
right.
So that
Yeah. Yeah. Like, definitely, there are people with disorganized attachment, like fearful avoidance, um, that intimacy has never felt safe. So it's something that they need or something that they hold on to. And like coping strategies, they work as long as they work. And sometimes they become like super painful. Um, and then it's like, then we have to like venture outside of, or, or maybe that bubble gets burst and we're not the one who goes out, but it gets burst. And then it's like, well, then we have to come up with like a new strategy or a new dream. And then we have to like figure things out. But um, I think it is good to, I mean, the way that I work and the way I like to try to approach life as sometimes is like as a relationship, like anthropologist, to like try to, through sort of a non-attachment lens, not like detachment, but to like zoom out and just say, okay, what if I see this situation with like curiosity, and what if I don't hold on to outcomes, and like what if this person isn't the only person in the world, like all those things, right? Which can feel very dangerous and
yeah,
also
I'm gonna die.
potentially, right? Like I'm going to die, or yeah, like if I'm not connected to this one person, like nothing exists outside of this one person, which I view as a very like child to parent kind of like orientation.
Yeah.
If we can have either like hyper attachment, like too much attachment that's not really healthy for us, or
Okay.
we could be in a place of like total detachment where we just don't try to hold on to anything at all because it's just like I give up.
Uh
And what
huh.
we want to be is like in the middle, like find the sweet spot of non-attachment to, like, of course, in the moment connection, being with people, but knowing that we can rely on ourselves and be securely attached within ourselves, knowing that we have sovereignty as adults to create new connections, that we are creators, and that we can find new connections and put ourselves into safe relationships, and when we need to, we can move in and out of relationship.
Right. Just respond to whatever is
Right.
actually happening in the moment.
Right. And like non-attachment is one of the ways that we can actually I think, best like have healthy relationship dynamics, because then we're not holding, like gripping onto something and betraying ourselves and like giving up everything just to have this one person, and twisting ourselves into a pretzel to make this work, because if this doesn't work, we will die.
Right.
Because I definitely think that's more of like the anxious attachment perspective. Like,
Yeah.
it's like love addiction. I will die without this other person who has become my primary attachment figure. I will die without them. I cannot
Right.
survive without this.
Yeah.
On the other side, this very like detached thing can come from, I think, more avoidant wounding, where it's like, I have been so very wounded and hurt in relation to other people that I just don't fucking care anymore. I'm
Right.
just going to give up.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do we come to the middle in like trusting ourselves when it comes to relationships, to practice kind of like, I mean, not to get all Lion King, but like the circle of life, like the
Uh,
hoop, like things coming down the river and going, and like
yeah.
allowing things to change, like allowing, like when this partner goes, that we don't let our identity like go with them, but that we step up and dream new dreams and create new things, and then like decide that we're worth, like life is worth living, even if it's just us experiencing us. Of course, like it's juicier when we're experiencing in relation to other people, like in connection and relationship, like it's so much more juicy. But what are we really doing? I think we're experiencing ourselves like with other people, or we're experiencing ourselves like by ourselves. So it's all kind of like I don't know, I sort of, because it's all filtered through our
Yeah.
perspective. So I still feel like we're the ones,
It's a creative dance. Yeah.
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 Okay, I went a little off topic. I went a meandered, but the rejection piece, like, so this is, I guess basically this would be me like kind of owning. Okay, I can tell this story because like I don't really know this person, and this story about these letters that started showing up at my
Oh yeah.
doorstep.
Right.
So I have been told that I'm very attractive and pretty. I've been accused of attractiveness, and
You bastard.
um, and I have had lots of male attention. Not all of it, most of it not really wanted, but it is what it is. And but there's been a piece for me, like as a female, but also I think coming from some of my own enmeshed behavior, like codependent relationship with my mother growing up, where I feel like I have to protect people's feelings, and I don't want to be like the bad person to burst their bubble or let them down, because it probably boils down to like, if they're not happy or they're not safe, then I'm not safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have all these like different things that come up when I'm like, I'm going to reject this person. And I do. It's not like I date people that I don't want to date, or like that I just end up in relationships that I don't want to. It's not like that. It's more like maybe not being as direct as I could, or if I had certain like friendships with males, I might have suspected that they had feelings for me, and then eventually they'll be like, "Hey, I have feelings for you." And I'll be like,
Just wanted to tell you something.
"Well, like sometimes it's like that, and other times it's just like it's just different. The way it's I'm told is like different."
Okay.
And like it's very interesting to me to be like, I don't know, like the projection screen for like desire, for male desire, you know what I mean? It's like I showed up and like this is my flesh suit. You know what I mean? And it's just kind of weird to be, I don't know how to explain that. It just feels weird to be me and to have like this attention for things that I feel like I don't have a lot of control over. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't have responsibility for anything or for anybody's stuff. And like walking around, nobody puts a goddamn thing on me ever, right? So it's like I can sort of understand like how like when something is foisted upon me about how like of a alien and disgusting feeling for me anyway when I'm foisted upon, right? It's like not cool. It's like
I like your word,
yeah, yeah.
foisted.
So you get foisted and it's like and you didn't have a choice. It's like
Yeah, kind of. And like, you know,
but what's your
one way of
relationship with
looking,
it?
yeah, like one way it can almost feel like masturbatory, like they're very much like, oh, you're so great, you're so this. And I'm like, yes, while I have great qualities and great things, like I feel like I have a pretty good self-esteem. But on some level, I'm like, gosh, like this is really gross in a way because I'm like this, like I'm not this perfect fucking thing, you know? And then I'm wondering also, like, is there a part of me that like wants to be seen that way or wants to be seen as the good person? So then, of course, you and I've talked about this, like, how am I contributing somewhat to the dynamic? And I don't want to say like I'm fully responsible for everything because I think that can be unfair, but it's like where there's like charge or where there's like resistance or triggering, it's like, okay, that stuff is mine. And, you know, I don't know, I guess about the rejection piece, there is a squirmy, squiggly part of me that's like, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I want to be really kind.
Because you didn't want to hurt mom's feelings, right?
Right. But also, there's a part of me that is like filled with rage and is like wants to be like Kali, like the destroyer, and like fucking say awful things and hurt their feelings very much and just be so mean that they run away crying. Like I
So
hope to
like
make them cry and run away.
okay, so so how does it present to you? So it's like you described I don't want to hurt your feelings, which feels kind of like a sheepish energy. It's like it feels soft, like soft and a little ooey. Like I don't want to hurt their feelings. I want
Yeah.
to take care of them, opposed to like I want to fucking kill you,
Mm.
Like so, like are they next to each other? Is it sort of like one level and then the other one sort of?
No, they're not next to each other. It's kind of like, you know, let's say I'm told, okay, someone tells me they like me. Okay,
Hmm.
cool. And then I know like I'm not interested in them that way, whatever. But then it's like I think if it keeps going and I've not reciprocated, but I'm being nice, or like even there's probably a part of me that's like probably caretaking like a little, maybe like operating with kid gloves, but not like, I don't even know, because I don't feel like I'm super caretakey type person, but a little, I feel like there's a little stuff there,
Hmm.
where I'm just like, I want to be a good person. I want to be a nice human and be responsible, like in a good Samaritan-y way, you know? I don't know. I blame my Catholic upbringing.
Oh, you're a Catholic. That's nice.
Yeah, like it's the whole Jesus, like be like Jesus, you know, like what would Jesus do? And then I think what happens is like maybe if I was more of a bitch up front, they would just be like, well, fuck you, and they would go away. But because and like I'm sure there's like a happier, healthier medium
Right.
as opposed to like 0 or 100, like
Right.
super nice and like fuck you.
Right,
Um,
and like from what you were talking about, there wasn't just one note. It was like the second note, or the third note, or the fifth note, or whatever it was. Like which is it's changing. So somebody could come to you and say something to you, and it's all like in the moment, right? You're just going to respond to what's in the moment. I'm just curious about the different layers, right? So the Gordian knot. So it's like there are separate layers that you get access to depending on what's happening in the moment, right? And so it's
mhm.
like yeah, you can be one energy or you can be this other energy. And there's probably even a couple more that are just a little bit more subtle that flash by really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's,
Well, there was something else that oh yeah, there is an element of, oh yeah, so there's actually an element of like disgust almost.
mm-hmm.
Like, ugh, it's weak. You
Yeah.
know, like there's definitely like a weak, and there's like a weird, I think, one up, one down thing where I am like the empowered, responsible one, and they are weak and need my help or
Sniveling.
whatever.
Yes.
Right. So there's that. So there's almost like a layer of like a little bit of disgust in there, I think, too. And then it's like, but there's like a lot of compassion and softness though as well. Like it's
Right.
all like mixed in there. Like
Uh-huh.
like we had said, the Gordian knot is like a good
Yeah.
thing because there's all these different threads
Right.
in there. And then um there's also a piece where I don't know how else to explain it other than sometimes I feel like I'm a member of like the bro club because I've always been like a tomboy and I was like in the army and I've just like had lots of male friends and been in lots of male organized, I've been like the only female in like lots of male dominated
So you know how
places.
to bro out.
Yeah, like I can bro out in ways that don't feel like I'm betraying myself, like they don't feel inauthentic. But of
Sure.
course, if we were to talk about like the patriarchy or like the negative aspects of patriarchy, then who knows? Like perhaps there, like I am egregiously trespassing on my own femininity or something in some ways. But there's definitely that a piece of that too, where I almost feel like yeah, like I feel like we should be like bros. Like I feel like I want to just be bros or friends. And so like earlier in my life, like I would have like comments made and I would just be like kind of let them roll off. Because I would just be like, no big deal, right? So but I think it was always a big deal. Okay.
Yeah. You're
And
trying to
then
bro out. Yeah.
right. So and like maybe that's some form of like dissociation or
Like,
just
I'm
trying to
cool. I can handle this.
I'm
Just the
super cool. This
guys.
doesn't bother me.
Just
I'm
the
like
guys. I'm a woman, but
I'm totally a dude.
it's
Like I
beside the point.
I totally have huge balls. Like
Yeah.
I'm so cool. Wherever that comes from. But then there was this piece of like there's it almost feels like there's like a point sometimes where someone will actually cross the line and it's like clearly like in some ways in my brain the way that I'm like looking at the whole thing like as a coach or like if I were to like listen to someone else talk about it, the level of my reaction tells me that there may have been other proactive boundaries that I could have set so that I didn't find myself like reactively defending, like having that energy show up to reactively like defend myself like that. It's just a perspective that I have as like a potential thing. But whenever I feel like there's a line crossed, for example, if they're like, I have these feelings for you and like I really love our friendship, I don't want to mess up our friendship, saying all these things. And then the second there's like stepping away from that into something that feels incongruent or inconsistent to what they have just stated, where it's like making another joke beyond that, like a sexual joke where they've just stated that like our friendship was important, then it's like something about that is like to me feels like the total violation. And then it's just like rage.
Want to kill you, right?
Yeah, I want to kill you. I want to like
Yeah.
dismember you. And
So as you're telling the story, like I can't remember a specific part, but I from coming from the other side of like doing that, like pushing
yeah,
that boundary and then doing it one more time, right?
yeah,
It's just whatever that totem, that thing, the fantasy that lives there, like it, because it still does, like it protrudes into, like it's trying to like manifest out into reality, right? Like it wants to be real,
yeah.
or you want it to be real, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get caught in kind of like in between, where it's like you're talking to the real person, but the
Mm.
fantasy person is here like really pushing in, you know? And so it's like, blah, 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 you know, it's like, well, I don't want to like jeopardize what we have, but like, but really the thing that is more pressing here is what is leaning in on me here. And so that's like, that's what's going to make me say the next thing or, you know.
Is it in like hopes that it will be reality? Is it
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
oh, she will finally get it. Like she will then reciprocate.
Yeah, but I feel like the manifestation as it comes through is really super twisted because it's not like you're coming up with some grand scheme or plan or like actually bringing it in a way that's like charismatic and you know like at least for me anyway it was always like very assholes and elbows. It was very like it was very like kinky like just like you know it's like yeah you know it's like here I'm saying things that are you know, so like semi inappropriate, you know, or it's just like not forthright or like transparent about like what is coming through right now, you know, because it's there's a
Yeah.
reaction to right.
It makes me think,
And I have seen like the Kali energy then come through. It's like you sort of like push in and then like you'll hit it and you'll just know because it's like it flashes in an instant. It's like holy shit now yeah okay well I've really fucked up like I really went on over the line there you know like I don't know I when you when you said that like it's just like you know reminding me of like stupid little you know little things
yeah.
right
And actually, it's funny because, oh my God, I'm having the realization that I too actually have done that at one point inadvertently, although it wasn't sexual. Oh God, this is like, it's so funny. I hadn't like thought about it. And now I realize that, oh, so long story short, it's kind of this crazy. Anyway, so there was a guy
okay
and, sorry, I'm trying to think of how much story I want to tell, but basically when I was married, um, I'm like tend to be like pretty loyal or at least very singular focused like in my relationships, like very much not
you're in it
having like
right
yeah, I was like
full
in
sway
and that
yeah
in my marriage I was in. There
yeah
were other relationships that there was actually more intimacy and security, and then I would notice my avoidance stuff come up and I would be like, I'm shopping. Now I'm shopping.
mm.
So in my marriage, I wasn't shopping until I think later, and there was like love starvation and all kinds of stuff happening that I wasn't aware of, but I was still very like loyal, and that was like a huge thing that was important to me, like being super loyal and all in, right?
right
Um, but there was someone that I had worked with, and he had been there, but I would like had not been aware of him, and but it was interesting. It was very interesting. The second I got divorced, like he popped right into my brain.
ah
So like he registered on some level that was not fully conscious or something.
right so what is he right then like he's a thing up here right
He was somewhere.
he's in there
He was in there somewhere. And then so we had both wound up in DC, and like so this was probably like a year or two after my divorce, like separation. And we like ended up meeting up. Like he had asked me to join this party because there was a lot of other people I think that we had worked with like in Korea together. There was a bunch of us there. I didn't make it to that party. He ended up dating someone else. I ended up dating someone else. Okay.
okay
But then I my relationship had ended, but his relationship was still going on. And then we had met up just as friends, just to reconnect or whatever. There was like crazy attraction,
mm-hmm.
but it wasn't just me. It was like, but I didn't know actually that it was reciprocal because he had a girlfriend. We hung out
okay
a couple times. And then one time before I was about to move to New York, we had met up and he was acting really weird, like super, super weird. And I was like, what is going on? And he was like, oh, I need to check on the dogs, or oh, I need to do this. And I'm like, hey, if you need to go do stuff, like go, like we don't have to have dinner, like go take care of whatever you need to.
right
And then he was like, here's the thing, like I have feelings for you, like I really like you. He's like, I really like you, and that's a problem. because I have this girlfriend.
Yeah, it's a problem.
And I was like, I really like you too. And
Yay.
which was kind of a cool thing for me. It was like kind of a first where there was like reciprocal, like this kind of attraction.
Okay.
So we ended up having dinner but we weren't, there was no plans to get together or anything. But then something had come up where he had talked about just feeling like he wasn't able to talk about like spiritual things or just things that really mattered to him. He was like, I just feel like I can't talk about them with her. And so after I'd moved to New York, like I ended up sending him this email and I was like, maybe you're not that happy in your relationship, you know, like maybe that's why you were sort of, and like honestly, if he had just left his relationship, I would have been like, I can't see you. Like you would just flake down your relationship, you know? So it was kind of like an impossible situation. And it wasn't like I was necessarily offering a relationship, but I did. I just said, maybe you're not super happy in your relationship. And he like, that was the collie thing. He was like very angry. Like he sent me an angry email back, essentially letting me know that I had like crossed some kind of line because, you know, it was his relationship. Like they had been living together and stuff. And then I think they ended up getting engaged and getting married. But, um, and I don't know, there was like some kind of love addiction. I think some kind of fantasy there. Um, but also it was probably me just like
Yeah.
giving unsolicited relationship
Right. So
advice.
there's some sort of like resonance, right, that you both recognize and you both talk about, but then there's like the part of you that just like kept like injecting in, right? Like they couldn't stop yourself
Yeah. Yeah. And it wasn't like, yeah. But now that I think about it,
until he's like you're tap dancing too close to the
yeah.
yeah, and you're like, hey, you know, fuck you, get
And
back.
yeah, and it's like I don't even know that I had like plans per se. Like and like I said, if he were to have been like, you're right, I'm gonna leave her and be with you, I would have been like, you're not coming over here. So it was like, and maybe eventually, I don't know. I had not
Yeah.
really thought it out, but
No, it's okay. Well, I mean, they're different fantasies. I I do not remember a specific time, like, but I can remember like emotions, right? Because I know that like I've pushed through a fantasy thing before and met that restrictive
mhm.
energy. But when I imagine like like sort of like blurting out through the fantasy and then like the person there being like, okay, that's great, like I just would have gone with it, it's just like, okay, good.
Mm.
In a moment though, in a moment, like I think that like you know it's so fucking crazy because I've done it like right at the turns of like you get what you want and then like it just flips, it just turns, right? It's just like, oh,
Right.
actually I'm
So
I was just leaving.
that's what I think. If he had like turned around and been like, "Oh yeah, let's do this," I would have been like,
Yeah. Oh, you'd be like,
"You
oh,
are
we're just playing,
you're barking up the wrong tree here, buddy." Like,
Yeah.
ew, gross. Get it
The
away.
the thing that I like to do is just be headed that direction, but if I actually do ever head that direction, I'm actually going the other way.
That's right. Like,
Just so
yeah.
we're both clear about that.
Just so we're clear, this is a fantasy. You're not supposed to
Right.
actually fulfill the fucking fantasy. That's
Oh
that's
man.
part of it.
That's like double meta because like I thought that I wanted it, but like I didn't, which is an actual fantasy.
Which is like I feel like super just that's like so disorganized, you know. It's just a very disorganized or ambivalent
Fucking
you know,
confusing. I'll tell you that once.
fearful, avoidant. Yeah, it's like, come here,
Jesus.
go away. Come closer, come closer. No, no, too close. No, actually go all the way over there. No, no,
That
too far.
actually
Come
feels
back over
terrible.
here. Yeah, that feels bad. Oh, and you being
Man,
here feels bad too.
yeah,
Actually, it all feels bad. You
yeah.
suck.
What I need you to be doing is constantly changing from every moment, like a super stasis. Yeah. Oh, that feels good. Let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess to talk about, I think we've kind of
Expectation and
fleshed that one
entitlement.
out.
Yeah.
No, I think we covered that one, but the rejection piece, that like a part of it was
Oh, yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
wanting to, especially when someone brings what's the word you say, to foist.
Foist.
Someone's foisting their fantasy upon me. Ugh. Then I'm like, like my brain is doing a lot of different things. Like I don't want to hurt their feelings. There's a part of me that like wants to take care of them and like not reject them, but then there's also a part of me that's like, if I reject them, are they going to be some kind of crazy pants like bunny boiler, like is something going to go, you know what I mean? Like and I think that those are legitimate fears too, because of things that, well, just women
Yeah, and
things,
they
bad
should.
things happening,
Right.
those. So
Always
my
imagine
brain,
the worst.
and so like part of that like kindness is also out of self-preservation. Like I want to be super kind so I don't enrage this person that I do not know what their mental state or their capacity for violence or whatever. So it's just like I just feel like it's kind of a big thing in a lot of ways to like, yes, I want to be nice as a human, but I almost wonder like how would I be if I wasn't worried about like being a good Christian, like Jesus, or if I wasn't worried about like being a nice person, or if I wasn't worried about violence, or if, like I think we were talking about this earlier, but like what would my life be like if I could just show up with complete emotional honesty in like every moment? Like what would that be like, or what would that look like? I almost can't imagine just
What?
being so very super honest.
So in my day job, I just run into tons of people, right? Tons of little interactions, and I've contemplated some of the same things, and for me, it really just follows like honestly, like okay, what's the temperature of the pot today? Is it
Mhm.
boiling? Am I like enraged and like having lots of unmet needs and feel terrible? Well, then I embody terribleness and can be, you know, uh, like for a while, I've actively fucking hated everybody. I could
Mm,
just see
mm.
people and just like, like, oh man, I could just tear on people, and then as I like things change, and
I think I had that phase too,
yeah,
definitely, where I
but
felt angry and
calm down, and I think that like in a calm, we'll just say resourced place, that I actually am giving of spirit, right? And that like I find myself like being gentle with people who maybe need it, or just generosity of spirit, right, where you can,
yeah.
like obviously like if somebody demonstrates they don't deserve it, like yeah, I don't have any problems on like telling somebody to fuck off if that's what they really need, but I think that that's like an honest place. Like it changes, I've been a total shit and been an asshole, but I've also like felt like that I've showed up and just been like calm and solid and giving, which feels like like an honest reflection of myself sometimes too.
I think that what I strive to do and strive to like mentor is like, how do I show up with like in the kind of self-expression and self-honesty like that I need for me? Like, how do I show up there? And then also, what
Mm,
do I need to like feel safe and do that? Like, so
right.
what do I need to feel safe? Like, to what extent do I share all of that that feels like I'm really honoring myself? And
Mm,
then can I do that and like also consider other people and like be kind? You know what I mean?
okay. So if
And
you're keeping up the first bargain really well, right? It's like how,
it's like a balance, right? It's
yeah,
like I don't just want to fully, I mean, like, I think in some ways, like, that is amazing sometimes to just be like, I'm fully like expressing everything without regard. But I don't always know if that's super wise, to always just,
yeah,
like, I think we know how that turns out. Like, if you've seen any movies or stories, like, where people are just totally honest and totally like,
can be destructive.
right, it can be destructive. And so it's like, how do
Yeah,
I honor this as much as I can, how I'm feeling, what I need to express, like honor this,
yeah,
but consider like myself, of course, with kindness, and consider other people with kindness.
sure.
It's kind of what I strive. Is there another bullet point?
Uh, we kind of. Oh, I wrote. There was this one, which might be a different topic. Being driven or called,
Mm.
repulsion, compulsion. I don't know how it falls into. Well,
It might be another topic,
well, I mean, if it
but
comes into expectations and entitlement, just how it can present. But I don't know. We're sort of like we're in this a little bit. I think that this feels like a decent stopping point for now. What do you
yeah,
think?
I guess yeah, we could stop because I don't know where we are with time, but the
The clock
I think
says 3 hours and 18 minutes. It's not that long.
that's not correct.
I know. I know. It's not.
But what the only thing I would say about like applying being driven or being pulled
Mm-hmm.
in relationship, like that can definitely apply like in relationship where we can be driven by certain instincts that aren't necessarily like the best for us, or we can actually be driven into relationships, certain relationships by our wounding. And so
Absolutely.
it's like the difference, it's like understanding what's driving our relational choices and doing our best to recognize inspiration and love and like being pulled versus being driven towards something. I think making that distinction in like any area of life is very important, and and a lot in relationships, because like our relationships are foundational for so many things. You
Yep.
know, if they say like one of the biggest decisions that a person can make is like who they're married to, because you're connected to this person, you know. And it's honestly, it's the same whether you're married to someone or not, or whether you're friends or not. The people you surround yourself with are so very important to your level of being able to like feel safe and regulate, and just to be able to deal with like the all the little, you know, peaks and valleys of life, you know. And so it's like we need to make sure that we have very solid support systems, and that we're able to cultivate really healthy and safe connections. That's my piece. Now you can say your piece.
I think that's great, right? Uh, but it's making me think about how, like, even the 101 about like the basic feeling of being compelled to do something, like because I lived so much of my life, right, being compelled
The power of Christ compels you,
yeah,
compels you.
and it's just completely unconscious, right? And so that like takes up, I would say, 98% of my bandwidth, right? That's the lead pony. That's what's pulling the wagon, right? And so to like have like some conversation about like contextualizing that was just like ridiculous, totally ridiculous. I had no idea what was happening.
Would you say, wait, for some reason, like the word obligation is coming up. Is that like the same flavor, or is that a bit different?
I don't know. I mean, it is obligatory just because it's like what gets to be in control, right? There's just like there was almost like no autonomy or like almost no self to happen just because of the drives that were sort of like compelling me, like tugging me by the end of my nose. And so like you know having some sort of like abstract higher minded idea about like, oh, the people around me are the are really important and help make my environment. It's just like real life is just like so far removed from
Mm,
being able to like begin to even have that conversation or to think that way, right?
yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's my I'm like squirming over here when you're
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
that.
no, like totally. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that could be a big source of shame for someone to be like, oh, why am I choosing to like hang around healthy people? Or why am I just moving towards this dysfunction when it's dysfunction? But it's like we all start in a place of just what's familiar, and like we just do the best we can. So it's
Right.
like, yeah. And yeah, because oh God, yeah, that's like a really difficult place to like be able to come to, like to get to that place where you're like consciously choosing relationships
Mm-hmm.
is not an easy thing, like at all. Like that's like mastery. That's like that's like penthouse suite, like sitting on the top of the mountain going, wow, I've done it. I see it all. This is great, you know? Um, but I think we just get there like little by little by just having more awareness and then trying to take action and just do a little better, just try, you know, and like release the pressure. But yeah, I think it's important that you brought that up because totally, I have totally been in many relationships and situationships where I just felt like I was being compelled or pulled by this like fish hook, like in my solar
Mm.
plexus, just pulling me,
Mm.
like almost energetically, just feeling the addictive nature of like
Oh
what
yeah.
my stuff was, and it was just being like,
Oh yeah.
almost like, is there a movie where it's like a beam and then they like get caught in the tractor beam and it just like pulls them, you
Yeah,
know?
it's called Star Trek.
Oh yes, that Star Trek tractor beam, yeah. So being like pulled in, right,
Oh
like
yeah.
a tractor beam or whatever, like you just can't, you know, or like the dark crystal, you can't look away.
Yes, you cannot look away. It's that's way more what it feels like. I like that. It's like it's so sticky and inside of your being and encompassing
Mm.
that my birth out of that like sticky situation is just like light speed shearing pain, just like
Mm.
peeling off the skin of all that stuff and just like
Jesus Christ.
oh, yeah. I mean, that's birth by like it's like birth by death. It's like, just
Mm.
searing pain into something like that. Like I don't know. Oh God, I'm still alive. Oh, it's like oh, I get it. It's a big
You
lesson,
just, yeah, you just touched on something somewhere, birth by death. It like totally.
right? You said something about creation too, or being creative too, and this like the spirit of
Mhm.
creativity, which I think
Mhm.
is uh, what I want to talk about, like how it feels. It's like if you could sort of describe the feeling to somebody, like it's like this, then they could like as it comes to them in their own life, they could be be like, oh, that's it, that's what that feels like.
You mean like describe what the creative
So you're talking about
process,
compulsion, or what was the
like
other word?
inspiration, like being pulled by inspiration?
Pulled by inspiration, as opposed to by
Right.
compulsion to just
Ooh. Oh, I feel like it's another conversation.
okay, let's write it down. Jesus.
We'll write it down and then we'll discuss it on another
All
podcast
right. I mean,
because I feel like, oh God, there's just so much there
no,
actually.
yeah, it's good. It's juicy.
So we'll leave this as a special cliffhanger. This is a cliffhanger. Oh
Yeah,
my
and
God.
and we know where we're going.
And we know what we're doing. We totally know what we're doing.
Uh huh.
We're professional.
Yeah, professionally fucking lost.
All right. Cool.
All right. Well, it was nice talking with you, Angela.
Yeah, always. And thank you, everyone, for listening and subscribing and tuning in and commenting, like submitting your
Yeah, I mean, like,
questions. And
so far our format is just like riffing, writing down like a few bullet points. They're just like they're posts to pass on the way that on our way through point A to
mm,
point B. So getting some other like sort of juicy sort of destinations for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Food for
yeah.
thought. So
Requests, all that welcome
right.
and feedback, as long as it's considerate.
And if it's not, then we won't.
We won't. We won't.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have boundaries. Thank you.
All right. Cool.